Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and descend into the hidden depths of Haruki Murakami's 1995 masterpiece, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I mean, for decades, readers have been totally captivated by its surreal blend of domestic mystery and magical realism. But today, we're going to look at the actual machinery operating beneath the surface. We are going to explore the brutal historical trauma that literally stains the narrative, the deep Jungian psychology driving its characters, and finally, a frankly shocking publishing secret that altered the experience for millions of English-speaking readers.
Like a map for our descent, here's our agenda. We'll hit 1, the Nomonhan incident, 2, the effective protagonist, 3, a Jungian descent, and 4, the missing English chapters. Let's get into it. Starting with Section 1, the Nomonhan incident, the historical surface. Now, in Murakami's world, the past is never really dead, and the stark historical trauma haunting this entire narrative begins right here. What started in May 1939 is just a minor dispute over grazing horses rapidly escalated into this massive, undeclared border war between the Soviet Union, Mongolia, Japan, and the puppet state of Manchukuo. By June, the Japanese Kwantung Army was launching unsanctioned airstrikes. In July, they attempted a massive two-pronged assault. But the real turning point? That came in August, when Soviet General Georgy Zhukov launched a devastating, simultaneous three-pronged counterattack using airplanes, tanks, and infantry.
Just look at the sheer scale of death and destruction hidden within this largely forgotten pre-WW2 conflict. I mean, these cold, hard numbers represent incredibly intense historical violence. The Japanese and Manchukuo forces suffered anywhere from 20,000 to 50,000 casualties, while the Soviets and Mongolians saw over 26,000. We're talking hundreds of tanks and aircraft completely obliterated. So why does this matter for our explainer? Well, because this massive, senseless bloodshed bleeds directly into the present lives of Murakami's characters. It serves as this heavy, generational trauma that infects the modern psyche.
Moving on to Section 2, the effective protagonist, moving below the surface.
To really grasp this novel, we have to understand the mind experiencing it. Literary critics often use something called Terence Donson's methodological postulates to identify the affective protagonist. And this isn't just a fancy term for the main character, it's the axial character. It's the person whose psychological development gives structural coherence to the whole narrative. In this story, every single bizarre event, every mystical encounter, and every historical flashback revolves entirely around Toru Okada's deeply troubled psyche.
Toru's descent into his own mind starts in what's known as an emancipated state. He's just living this passive, super easygoing life. But when his wife, Kumiko, vanishes, he gets pulled into the psychic world through characters like Malta and Krita Kano. This sparks a profound psychic awakening down at the bottom of a dried-up well, which eventually culminates in a final psychological resolution where he actually accepts the reality of himself and his marriage.
Which brings us to Section 3, a Jungian descent into the darkness.
As Toru descends into his literal and metaphorical dried-up well, we can use 4 key Jungian archetypes to peek into the darkness of his mind. First up is the persona, basically the social mask a person wears for the world. Toru's mask is that of Mr. Wind-Up Bird. He's this easygoing, seemingly unburdened guy who's totally content with domesticity. He quit his job as a paralegal and literally spends his days cooking spaghetti and looking for a lost cat. It seems like a harmless mask, right? But it actually hides a profound, deeply rooted disconnection from his own life.
You know, listen to Toru's own words here. He has this terrifying realization about his disconnected persona. Despite being married for 6 whole years, he suddenly realizes he has absolutely no idea who Kumiko actually is. This feeling of separation and distance really highlights just how completely the mask he wears has kept him isolated from the true nature of the woman he supposedly loves.
Next, we dive into the shadow. Deep within Toru is this violent tendency that completely contradicts his easygoing persona. Remember the brutal military violence of the Nomonhan incident we talked about earlier? Well, that same suppressed violence erupts from Toru's shadow whenever he experiences serious emotional turmoil. We see it manifest during his surreal encounters in that labyrinthian hotel, where he viciously beats a man with a baseball bat. It's literally the raw, primal frustration of abandonment finding a physical destructive outlet.
Then we have the anima, which is the unconscious feminine aspect within the male psyche.
Toru's anima manifests in his deep, almost obsessive comfort with household chores. I mean, the guy has a precise 12-stage system just for ironing his shirts. And while that might seem completely mundane to us now, in the highly rigid, career-driven Japanese society of the 1980s, this is a massive subversion of gender roles. His intense emasculation turns him into a passive observer in his own marriage, which, as we see, is a huge factor in his wife eventually leaving him.
Finally, through his grueling, intense meditations down in that pitch-black well, Toru reaches the self. He integrates his violent shadow, he accepts the reality of his anima, and he confronts the hard truth of his fractured marriage. The dried-up well literally fills with water, beautifully symbolizing that the psychological blockage in his personality has finally been cleared. He is no longer just a wind-up toy waiting for someone else to turn his spring. He actively resolves to wait for Kumiko, fully aware of her flaws and his own.
Okay, Section 4. The missing English chapters. The blocked well. Right as Toru reaches this profound, deeply satisfying psychological resolution in the narrative, I have to yank you back to reality to reveal a genuinely jarring truth. Because the US publisher, Knopf, feared that a massive doorstop of a novel by a then unfamiliar Japanese author wouldn't sell, they literally took a pair of scissors to the text. The translator, J. Rubin, actually submitted a fully complete English translation, but to meet a strict page count, over 60 pages were completely excised from the final print. They cut out essential character arcs, the closure of the Kano sisters, and the very psychic resolutions we just spent time analyzing. No way, right? Decades later, fan-translated versions of these missing chapters started surfacing online, and the reaction was explosive. Look at the absolute outrage and passion from the Reddit community once they discovered these missing pieces. Users perfectly captured the sentiment, pointing out how these omissions entirely shifted the reader's understanding of the psychological payoffs. For years, readers felt something was slightly hollow about the book's final act. And guess what? They were right. It wasn't Murakami's writing at all. It was an editorial mandate.
Fans were intensely frustrated, realizing that an iconic piece of global literature was butchered simply to save a few bucks on printing costs. As one user pointed out, you wouldn't just chop 30% out of a Thomas Pynchon book because it felt too long. Yet, this incredible text, so rich with the historical echoes of Kalkin Gol and deep Jungian labyrinths, was quietly censored by commercial interests. It's kind of wild to think about.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. As you digest the hidden histories, the repressed shadows, and the dried-up wells of Murakami's masterpiece, I want you to leave with this final, provocative thought. When we read translated works, whose version of the story are we really getting? How much of our understanding of global literature is shaped or entirely shattered by the hidden scissors of publishers? Definitely think about that the next time you pull a book off your shelf. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the big questions.